So I'm here with my man, Richard Bridges. He's our Director of Agent Development. Richard's done a lot of hard work helping us to, kind of talk through these things and develop it. Richard leads a lot of our great coaching, a lot of our great education stuff here. And I know Lynn's in the crowd. Lynn teaches a lot of great classes for us as well on buyer value. So we kind of are collaborating to kind of make this easy for you today. So commission conversations, what is this all about? My goal with this class and where the idea that we kind of came from was this. There's going to be two main conversations that we're going to have a lot now coming up, especially starting in August 17th, right? And one is going to center around, okay, I'm talking to a buyer and they're going to say, well, why do I need an agent? I don't need an agent, especially if I have to pay you because I'm not used to the possibility that I might have to pay you out of my own pocket. Now, most of the time, they're hopefully not paying you out of the pocket. It's going to be from the contract. But there's going to be a conversation around your value as a buyer's agent, one that's never really existed much before because a lot of times it just went, well, the seller pays and it's not really that big of a deal. So we're going to talk a lot about how do you talk to your buyers, about framing your value as a buyer's agent. And I know Lynn teaches a whole class about that, but I'm going to try to simplify it down to a little bit easier conversation. I love the conversation word part of it. The second conversation we're going to have a lot about it or talk a lot about is, okay, I'm talking to my seller, and what are they going to say? I've seen these lawsuits. I hear I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. That's great, right? I hear my commissions have gone down. Well, how do we answer that question? And the whole thing I want you to think about during this presentation, what we're going to talk a lot about, and I'm going to call on some of you to do is, you've got like 2 minutes. When a buyer turns to you in the supermarket or showing that first house at you meet them at an open house, or a seller turns to you during a listing appointment and says, either a buyer says, I don't need a buyer's agent, or a seller says, we don't need to pay a buyer's agent. You've got like 2 minutes to win them. You've got 2 minutes and you better have what you're going to say. You better believe it. You better be confident in what you're saying, and you better have practiced your thoughts because you got 2 minutes to win them over. Either I'm open to paying a buyer's agent, or I'm open to having you as my buyer's agent. So those are the two kind of concepts we're going to go around. So the beginning, what we're doing is we're going to go through our top 5 reasons. We're going to go through 5 points, 5 points that I want you to consider. We're going to talk through each one of them, Richard and I, and then we're going to kind of open up for questions, open up for thoughts. We're going to just focus on the buyer conversation for the first half. And the second half is going to be just focusing on that I'm talking to a seller and I want to convince them or talk to them about why a buyer agent is important, why buyer agents are rock stars. So that's kind of our format. We're going to focus on just the buyers in the beginning, sellers in the end. So we're going to go through all our points and we'll ask questions. We'll do some interrot. But the reason Richard said before we went on here is hold your questions on each point of your thoughts is we're probably going to get to it maybe one of our other 5 points. And then we'll kind of talk in a cumulative sense on what are some other thoughts when we're talking to buyers about buyer agents. I also want to say this. I know National Association of Realtors have put out, points like 196 reasons why you should use a buyer's agent. That's great, and you can put somebody out in front of anybody, but that's not going to impact them. What I want to do is, what I want you all to walk out of here with is a framework to how I can have a 2-minute conversation where I'm ready for my elevator speech. Somebody gets in the elevator on the 5th floor, by the time you get to the first, have you convinced them that there's value in a buyer's agent on either side? So that's the idea that I'm living with today. So I've kind of prefaced what we're going to talk about. Any thoughts on that? Richard, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to read 198 points as to why they need a buyer's agent, you're going to get to point 7 and they're going to be gone. Mm-hmm. You're going to be like this, and then they're not going to be paying attention anymore. So we need to get the most succinct, the most powerful points, and you got to have the confidence to deliver that information in a way where they go, where do I sign, right? And that's what we're hopefully going to get through today.
Exactly. So that's the kind of format. We're going to dive right in with our top 5 of buyers. There's Donny, Richard. I should have probably did that before. Look at that. 2 good-looking guys right there. So we're going to talk about our commission conversations. The first part's going to be why should I have a buyer's agent. Take notes. We are going to give you handouts after this, and we are going to put handouts on the nest with our points. The reason we didn't give them to you now is because you would just read the whole time and you wouldn't pay attention. So I want you locked in and paying attention, not just reading all your notes. So we are going to give all these to you in a paper format, but if you've got things to add, do that. So first point, why we should have a buyer's agent. Help negotiating the best deal possible. Listing agents represent the seller. When you go to court, do lawyers represent both sides or do they represent one side or the other? Right? They represent their side, right? So I think that's super important. And I think the idea of the lawyer in court is something that I love because when you go to buy a house, okay, we're going to buy a $500,000 house. You go, oh, let's go right to the listing agent. They can write it up for me. Who do they really represent? Who are they really looking out for? Not just in the price, in the terms, in the thing. They're going to tell you, oh, you don't need a home inspection. The place is in great shape. They take great care of it. Look at this beautiful home. These beautiful couple, they've done a great job. You don't need a home inspection. Or it's going to appraise fine. Everything, the one down the street just got 520, it'll appraise at 500, no problem. Who is that listing agent working for? They're working for the seller. And that's the point that I want to take, is that you need somebody negotiating for you, having your back. I'm not saying that we're going to steal it on the market because I'm some amazing negotiator. But the simple point is, do you want the listing agent who was hired by the seller, working for the seller, trying to work in your best interest? They can't possibly do that. And I think when you start on that point, it's the first key one. And now it puts them on their, it puts the thought process in their head. You're like, you're right. Somebody should be looking after me during this transaction. So that's my first point, is to help negotiate in the best deal possible. Listing agents represent the seller ultimately. That's where their whole allegiance is to. Even if they try to do a dual agency and represent both sides, you can't represent both sides fully. You're representing nobody at that point, to be honest. But if I'm a buyer, I want to know that somebody's got my back. Any thoughts to add on to that, Richard?
Yeah, in reality, this conversation is really easily conveyed to somebody when you say, why would you work with somebody who's negotiating against you? And every conversation you have with that listing agent, you're better equipping them to negotiate against you. Because a fiduciary responsibility of the listing agent to the seller is every piece of information that I get from this buyer, because I don't represent them, I'm passing along to that seller. So strategically, if that buyer's, maybe they're getting divorced and they need to buy a house and they have to be out of their apartment by the end of the month, is that valuable information to the seller? Is that information that buyer doesn't want the seller to know?
Absolutely.
Could it cost them more money in lost value in that negotiation than it would cost them to hire an agent?
Yep.
Potentially. So you have to actually show in this conversation both the value and also the risk in what they're opening themselves up to by trying to use the listing agent. And you're going to have more people do this because in their mind, they're going to think, I can't afford a buyer's agent. So their first instinct is just going to go, I'll just bypass the buyer's agent. I'll go straight to the listing agent. And that's what I'll do. That's going to be their intuitive response as a consumer who doesn't understand the real estate industry. So we have to be better at hedging against this conversation in advance and really being able to convince them and make them understand this is really not a good idea for a lot of reasons.
A couple points like that. They could be getting divorced and there could be a timeline problem. You could subtly slip, my kid's got to be in this school district. We've been waiting for something to come up in this school district. Something small like that you say to a listing agent as a buyer that just gave them total leverage. They know you're going to go to the end of the earth to get this house because you've got to have it for your kids in the school district or on the street because their best friend did this, or we're getting a divorce. I got to be out by the end of August. I've got to find something this weekend. Little stuff like that you drop could cost you thousands in a negotiation. You need to have somebody that has your back from beginning to end and is looking out for your best interest. So that's the first point you've got to land when you start with. And you got to have a couple good examples, and maybe relevant example to them, because you know this buyer a little bit. If you don't have something example to them, drop a couple of the ones about a school district or a kid or a divorce or something with timing. You could drop the subtlest thing. It could cost you thousands in a negotiation because they know how desperate you are to have that house in that time frame. So that was our first point, helping negotiate. Understanding all contingencies, timelines, and guiding you through the transaction process. It's a big one. If I looked at Joe Blow buyer right now, but what's a home inspection? Just ask him. Do you know what a home inspection is? Do you know what's involved in a home inspection? Do you know how much it costs to be in a home inspection? What are generally the timelines for a home inspection? Do we get stuff fixed for us? Do we not get stuff fixed for us? Explain to me an appraisal contingency. Now, I'm not saying to make it adversarial and talk through this, but bringing up home inspection contingencies, financing contingencies, an appraisal contingency, a radon contingency, those are scary words to people that haven't bought 5, 8, 10 homes. Us in this room, we understand, hopefully, we understand them fairly thoroughly, right? Because this is what we do for a job. Those are scary words to them, right? And the point that I would give is this. A couple examples would be this. Okay, you talk to a seller and they say, look, the house is in great shape. You don't need a home inspection. So you're like, okay, fine. I got to win the house. And then all of a sudden you go to move in and there's 20 things wrong. Or you found out there's this mold indentation in a basement or in a closet somewhere. Or you've got habitual flooding in a basement because a sewer line you could tell was way off. Or there were a couple shingles missing in the roof. And you could see a wet spot in the master bedroom, closet somewhere that you would have never seen. And all of a sudden they're big issues that you're inheriting when you move in. If you don't participate and have a home inspection or have somebody that's a pro walk through these things. Now, let's flip side. You do get a home inspection. Now I'm talking about the timeline point we got to make. Okay, they allow you to do a home inspection, and it's 10 days to do your inspection, and you do the 10 days, and you understood that part, right? And you send off what you need done because you kind of got a concept of things. Then they send back a rebuttal to you, and you have a negotiation period. And they send back a rebuttal, and the negotiation period was 3 days. Well, all of a sudden, you didn't understand what that meant. Was it business days? Was it calendar days? What's my deadline? How do I return serve? How do I write this up? How do I send this back? What are my recourses? Oh, timeline ended. Your negotiation period's over. You've now accepted the property in as-is condition. You've now accepted it you didn't come to a deal. You can either walk away or you can have it fixed, but now you are stuck, right? So it's not just understanding what a home inspection period is, it's timelines. That there are a million different timelines within our contracts. And if you don't understand what those are and how to respond in the proper way within those timelines, then you could get yourself in a whole lot of trouble. Appraisal contingency. That's a big one. And I would just shine a little bit of a light on that because especially in today's world where a listing agent, if I come to Richard as the listing agent and I want to make an offer, well, look, Richard's looking in out for the best interest of his sellers, right? Oh, it's going to appraise. Last couple have sold for $500,000, $515,000, $520,000. No big deal. You can waive that appraisal contingency. It's not a big deal. And you know what? If it's a little short, we'll probably work it out. Look, Richard says it confidently, says it's smooth. I'm like, okay, no problem. Waive that appraisal contingency. And I wrote the offer for $520,000 because I needed to get the house. Appraisal comes in at $500,000. What does that mean to you, Mr. Buyer? Well, I don't know. I mean, it comes down to $500,000, right? That's what. No. They don't come. You bought it for $520,000. The loan's only going to fund it for $500,000. So now you have two choices. You can either come up with the extra $20,000 cash, not counting your down payment, outside of the money you've already earmarked for your down payment. You got to come up with $20,000 new dollars, or if you can't do that, you can walk away from the contract. And now you've lost your earnest money deposit and the house you really wanted. There's a chance you can negotiate that back and forth and get a deal done. But who are you negotiating with now? A seller that has a listing agent that's on their side that doesn't really have any really strong reason to want to keep you in the deal, and this whole conversation is going to be slanted towards you. So the likelihood is you're either coming up with 20 extra grand to get to closing, or you're walking away from the deal. And neither one of those are really good options for you. But you didn't understand what appraisal contingency was to begin with. So I'm not saying to say this adversarially, but I'm saying to bring up a home inspection and appraisal contingencies. Do you understand what those mean? Do you understand what those timelines and the repercussions and how you could really get burned by not understanding that whole process? And the 30 seconds of going through those things can really go a whole lot, can make a world of difference whether they understand that there's whole things. It's not just negotiating a deal up front. It's not buying something on eBay. There's a whole process involved every step of the way that you're going to help guide them through to make sure that ends successfully.
I want to borrow a phrase that Casey used in a training not too long ago. He said, statistics tell, stories sell. You guys need to have a story for all of these, right?
Yep.
It's a really, really great point. I mean, he just used a lot of different examples.
I keep telling stories. Sorry.
In that example, though, that
but have one that you're ready to give.
Right. But in that example, if you give the statistics and just say, hey, look, in this scenario, you wrote at $520, it appraised for $500. You didn't have an agent. Probably the listing agent got a 3 to 5% earnest money deposit, and they just paid more in either out of pocket because they didn't have appraisal contingency or losing their earnest money than they would have if they had a buyer's agent who protected them, right? It literally cost them more in just one term to the contract. That's a very valuable thing to be able. That's the story you share in order for them to be able to go, okay, I get it. I want to move forward with this. You guys, we haven't even gotten into okay, they're a first-time home buyer. They're buying a condo. The condo, they get the resale disclosure package in the budget. They have a $30,000 assessment that's going to come up that's spread out over 10 years. They're signing up for it. It starts in December. They go, I had no idea this was even in there. They get 3 days to review 1,000 pages. Guys, there's so much in each of these points. And you could literally just list out on a checklist all of the terms to the contract and have a story for each of them. And if you don't have a story, ask an experienced agent because I'm sure they've got 10. There's so much information, and if you really got into it and we're just like, here's all the things, here's all the areas that you have to be really, really careful. Experience is going to pay for itself in dividends, and from a risk management standpoint, in reality, and just ultimately just the amount of stress reduction going through the process. Hiring a subject matter expert is critically important.
So touching on a couple contingencies and that there's timelines that they need to be aware of through that process. And that's where you can help them make sure that they're getting the protection they need from those contingencies, or not, but at least understanding the risks that go along with it through the process. So that's the next point I want you to make. Professional network of vetted service providers, inspectors, appraisers, lenders, titles, contractors. I like to tell a story myself of, and this is off topic. This is one that wouldn't hit my 2-minute pitch, but 10 years ago, 15, 17 years ago now, I showed somebody, a buddy of mine, right? I showed him 100 houses, and I joked the other day that everyone seemed to be at 5 p.m. They were going to see how many days in a row they could make me miss dinner with my family. I think that was their goal, right? But every time something came on the market, I was showing it. Can you do it 4:30, 5 o'clock? Sure, no problem. What was the only hour I get with my family every day? No problem, right? So I showed him a bunch of houses. And then he called one day. He was so excited. He said, Donnie, you're going to never guess what happened this weekend. We were walking around, the neighborhood, just, talking to some friends, walking the dog, and for sale by owner came on, and, they were about to list the home, and we worked it out without an agent. Aren't you so excited? This is fantastic. And they're going to sell us the house for $425 or whatever. Great. So they locked up the deal, and I was out the commission because I had a buyer agency agreement, but where was I going to go? Tell them to pay me 2.5%, 3%? I mean, it wasn't going to be realistic, right? So I didn't do it. Well, what happened in this scenario was he settled the contract, and the guy was kind of a friend. He called me 15 times. Do you have an inspector? Do you have an appraiser? Do you have a termite guy? Who can I call for this? Who can I call for this? Where am I going to close? There's 17 different issues that they called with questions. Now, look, I'm a nice guy, and my whole thought was big picture, right, Donnie? See the big picture. They'll give you referrals. Look, the right thing to do is to help the guy through the process, even though I wasn't getting paid. And I did. I did it with a smile, kind of, but the point is the contractors, look, you can open the yellow pages. The yellow page isn't even a thing anymore. You could go online and search for home inspectors, and you could do whatever. And look, everybody looks good online, but there's home inspectors that I've used 30, 40, 50 times. There's people that I've seen the bad stuff of, and I've pivoted from an inspector because they do the wrong things, right? And you could say, well, the listing agent will have a home inspector. Do you want to use the listing agent's home inspector? I mean, how much more slanted could the opinion be? That guy, he works for the listing agent every day. He does 10 inspections a month for the listing agent. You want him inspecting on your behalf? Come on, guys. Like, you want an inspector that's actually looking out for your best interest and that I've vetted and that I know is good. An appraisal, lenders, title companies. These are people that can cost you thousands of dollars if they don't do a good job or do the wrong thing. Or they can get it so that you miss closing or don't get your house if you hire the wrong lender or the wrong title company, the wrong thing. Look, if you've got opinions, great, but let me vet them. I do this every time. I've got great recommendations for you, and I can vet the ones you've got to make sure that we're using great pros to get us to the end game. Your end game is to buy a house, your biggest financial investment of your life. I've got people that specialize in this that I know that do a good job that will help us get to the finish line. So I think that knowledge, those relationships are super valuable to a buyer that doesn't know any of these people yet. And if you tell them, I'm going to use the listing agents people, or I'm going to use online, you're flipping a coin at best.
It's crazy because, the number of times I've had buyers at a home inspection and they go, well, when will I know if the house passed or failed? We all had that, right? They're like, when do I know? When do I get the pass fail? But I'm like, it's not it's a completely subjective process.
It shows that they have no idea what the process
So you
means.
tell me they don't have an agent and they get like a 75-page report and half of it's in red and they get a summary and they're going through and they're like, oh my God, there's double taps in the electric panel. My house is going to burn down the first day I buy it. That deal's dead, right? Like there is so much that we do that we just take for granted and don't even think about on a regular basis. But when you put yourself for 2 seconds in the shoes of the buyer and you think about how valuable those go-to people are that you recommend to the consumers, they help you get the deal to closing. Who in here is a listing agent who's worked with an unrepresented buyer before? Was it fun?
No. It's miserable.
It's terrible. It's awful. I would go, let me see if I can refer them to an agent. And a lot of times they'd be coming to me going, I want the commission back, right? Or I want you to give. I'm like, that's not how this works. But I hear you. God bless you. But yeah, I mean, I try to get them to another agent because I know this is going to be an absolute nightmare managing the emotions. Every time anything even remotely goes awry, they're going to be like, well, I'll walk, because they don't have anybody managing that process. This the contractors, the support network, all of that is just critically important, especially when you just need to recommend them to somebody.
You're making the biggest investment of your life. You want to make sure that each step of the way is protected by people that know what they're doing and have your best interest at heart. That would be the point I would make about that.
I was just thinking as you were talking about the home inspector earlier, if there's a listing agent and the buyer's not represented and they say, oh, well, who would you use as a home inspector? He's like, oh, I got a great home inspector. Actually, you get a great deal. $100, they'll do a walk and talk, in and out, 30 minutes, no problem. Not saying it would or wouldn't happen, but a listing agent, that's the best interest of their seller. So you got to think about these things, guys. It is not to the advantage of a buyer.
People are saying, wow, that happens all the time.
It does happen all the time. I don't want to just put everybody on blast, but that's the reality of it. Right?
And if that's all a buyer wants because they're fairly comfortable and it's their 7th home, that's one thing, right? But that's not what most people should be getting in the biggest purchase of their lives financially. So knowing the network of vetted service providers and making sure that you can get them there with that professional advice is great. Exclusive, first up, I would make sure I throw this in, right? Exclusive office exclusive network of almost 6,000 Samson realtors. That's important. That's a valuable thing. In an inventory world, maybe they're not in love with the house they are. Or maybe they're out there looking, they can't find the right one. If they had already found the right one, they wouldn't be talking to you right now, right? But the idea that because I'm a part of Samson Properties and I have these 6,000 realtors almost that are putting listings in every day that are coming soon in 2 weeks, 2 months, 6 months, I have access to inventory nobody else has access to. That you can't find on Zillow, that you can't find on Realtor or Homes, right? That is super valuable. So the office exclusive listing network that you're plugging into with Samson is great. And I would make sure I make that point is that I have stuff the online doesn't have before everybody has it. I work for the biggest brokerage in this area, and I have the most amount of realtors and the most market share, and I'm going to have information that nobody else has.
Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I got one question for you. Do you want to see some of the houses? You want to see all the houses?
No. That's a good one.
Great. Sign here, press hard, 3 copies, whatever.
Sign here, press hard, 3 copies.
That's been a while.
That's what you know. It's been a while.
Copy, but.
I got a question for you. Who's been doing it long enough since they were writing through with 3 copies? About a quarter of the room's been doing it long enough. We had I never wrote well enough or hard enough, so I could never get my copy at the bottom was always not very good, or the copy they got, I guess, was not very good. But yes, that's funny. Good one. All right, so that was a little shorter, but it's a point you can make in 10 seconds. That is super important, is that office exclusive inventory. All right, 4th point, market condition assessment. Offer strategies, inventory research, and up-to-date market data and trends. Buyers in general are going to be seduced by what they see on the news. The news is always behind on what today's market conditions are, right? They don't know. It's also very local, right? We could be looking at a condo building in Arlington that's got 10 condos available and 2 of them are being bought every month. Well, that's one we can really take advantage of price point, right? There could be one in Haymarket where there's 1 single family on the market and we know that each one gets 10 offers because everybody wants to move there, right? Every market is different. The point I would make here is this. I will help you figure out what the house is actually worth. What a seller lists a house for is irrelevant to what the house is actually worth. Some sellers, a house could be worth $600,000. There are some sellers that believe in listing at $575 and getting a bidding process going and getting to $625, getting to $650. There are some that think their house will take the same house and they'll list it for $650 because they think theirs is better than everybody on the block, right? Which one are we in right now? Do you know? I do, because I can do comps. I can do research. I can do the back work so that I can make sure we make the best offer possible. The list price is irrelevant when it comes down to what I'm going to offer. What I'm going to offer is based on what the comps say and then what my competition is out there and what I want to go at it. I can help you formulate the best strategy as it pertains to price point for the market. Make sure you don't overpay. I can also make sure we formulate the best strategy when it comes to conditions, for contingencies, and all those things. There's also so much market research that comes involved when it comes to up to the minute data that I have access to, that the public that's reporting June sales, that was really, when you talk about June closed sales, and I just talked about them yesterday in our sales meeting, right? Well, those were contracts that were probably written in April, best case May. It's July 18th. If those are the stats that the newspaper's going out, or that the TV's going out with right now, or the local articles online are going out with, well, these are the recent market stats. That's fine, but those are April and May contracts. It's July 19th. What's the market like today? I know that, and I have the most up-to-date data that I can relay that back to you to make sure we make the best offer for this house, because I have the best market research because I'm a pro.
I mean, it just comes down to me. You're an unrepresented buyer. You go to an open house. You and your significant other fall in love with the property. I want this house more than it's my dream home. I'll do anything to get it. And they're going and they're talking about what terms they're going to put together to write on this offer. There's 15 other offers submitted by professionally represented buyers. Are those people getting that house? Realistically, right. They don't know. I just did. This literally happened 2 months ago. I listed one of my own investment properties, so I was a listing agent and the seller. And we had an unrepresented buyer come in, and they were saying all the right things. Oh, we'll save you money. And it would save me money in this situation because I was the seller, didn't have to pay a commission. So I was like, all right, that's cool. I had 2.5 to the bottom line. And she was telling me all these things. We scheduled a showing. I had to drive from out here to Woodbridge, and I'd get there, we show them, and then they're like, all right, we're going to send you an email with our offer terms. What do you need? And I was like, all right, well, we need these things. Like, I just gave them bullet points. Just tell me what you want to do for these things, and then I can write it up, and we'll see where you end up. I have 7 other offers in hand, by the way. So I'm thinking, all right, well, they know. I've explained all of this to them. I've disclosed everything to them, and they send over the offer, and it's like 50 grand below the list price. And I was like, what are you doing? And they were like, well, when we walked through it, we saw we needed carpet, so that's like 15 grand. It needed to be painted. That's like another 15 grand. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I've got bad news for you. Like, we're not even going to go back and forth. We're going to go a different direction. But I appreciate it, and thanks for reaching out. Guys, it's just, how are they ever going to know what they need to do in order to craft an offer that's going to win them a dream home in a competitive situation?
If you're going against 10 other offers, whether you're too high or too low, if in this case they were too low, if you're trying to compete with 10 other offers and they all have got professional realtors guide them through this process, good luck being the one that wins out of those 10. Good luck.
Oh, they cited an article.
And is that the situation that you want to be in? Yeah. Do you want to be competing for your dream home and the other 9 people actually have realtors strategizing and putting together an offer for them, or do you want to be going it alone? I don't like your chances if you're going alone.
That was a point I was going to make. They cited a news article that they read. That was like a national real estate statistic. They were like, in Idaho, the market's down. And I was like, great.
Was that 5? Did I not count right? I did. So that was 5, and I said 4 at the beginning. So that was our 5th one for buyer size. Market condition assessment, offer strategies, inventory research, all super important to help us get to that best offer. The 5th bonus one was property research to protect your investment. We gave you a bonus one for each one. This is talking about that oddball deal, whether it's, tax records or permit records or all these things that you could figure out when really doing a deep dive in a house that they'll never be able to find out themselves. We had one the other day that, the swimming pool in the backyard wasn't permitted. Well, that could have ended up being a nightmare for that buyer if they had brought that property, right? Well, the seller had just built the pool, never got it permitted. Nobody had found out about it. They went to sell it. That buyer now is going to inherit a huge problem that probably isn't going to pass. Probably is going to the inspector told me that they were going to have to dig up the pool and do it all over again, or close it up and just wouldn't be a swimming pool. Can you imagine buying a house and thinking you have this $100,000, $150,000 pool in there, and all of a sudden just wasn't permitted, wasn't okay? So yes, this is an oddball, sure. But the property research to protect your investment that I have access to, I have the knowledge to go through, is another added investment that people will never get. Use the swimming pool example. Use the unpermitted basement that all of a sudden somebody finds out, that your basement was finished 5 years ago and it wasn't permitted. Well, and all of a sudden they're going to have to dig up walls and get this thing permitted after the fact, or they're just going to inherit something that could be a problem for them in the future.
Also, guys, people buy houses for the investment from an investment standpoint, right? It serves a utility. They're going to live there, but most people don't live there forever, especially a starter home. So there's a tremendous amount of value in just going like, all right, we're going to talk about terms, what we can get to win this house. We're also going to look at how the rental market might compare to what your mortgage payment is. So if in a few years you decide to trade up, but use this as a wealth building opportunity. And that type of research, the average consumer cannot do.
Yep.
Right. That is so powerful when you start talking about like how this one investment could create generational wealth for them. Could be a retirement vehicle, could be a cash flow vehicle, could contribute to their retirement, if I didn't already say that. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be able to provide. So there's more value than just what you do up until when they buy the house. There's a lot that you offer well beyond after they close.
So this is what I want to summarize this section quickly, and then we're going to go for thoughts here. We didn't go, well, you need somebody to open up the house, showings on your schedule, or I'm going to support you, or I'm going to give you great care. Those are titles that we use a lot, right? And are things we say a lot, and those are fine. And if you look at those 196 items, they're like, well, everything is a checkbox item. And look, today's world, they know that they can get somebody to open the house for them. And they don't buy in as much to I need that personal care. Yes, we all do think that that's very important, but you're not going to win somebody over necessarily in that 2 minutes. We're talking about helping you negotiate the best deal possible. The seller should not be the one helping you through this. You need somebody on your team. Lawyers don't represent both sides. Do you understand all the contingencies and the timelines that are going to go into a contract, making sure that you don't mess it up because you have a big snowfall on home inspection or appraisal or another contingency that you're not aware that you need, and the timelines to execute that contingency effectively. You're talking about having a network of people to make sure that we're inspecting your property, appraising your property, servicing your property, making sure that we get you a lender, a title company that gets you from today when you want to write that contract, to a successful closing, you moving into your house. You need a vetted network of professionals that I've either used or can make sure are doing a good job to get you to that process. I've got access to inventory that nobody else out there has because I work for the largest real estate brokerage around, and we've got access to inventory before it hits the market. You want to see some of the houses or all the houses on the market? I've got access to all of them, or at least more than anybody else. And then that fifth thing is I'm going to help you make the best offer and offer strategies when it gets down to offer time, is because I know the market conditions, I know the prices, I have the up-to-date data, and I can help you get there where you need to go. You need somebody protecting you and somebody helping you make the best offer possible in those strategies. Those are things that I think could really make an impact in a 2-minute conversation. Now, I was summarizing a little bit there at the end, but if I put that into a 2-minute, I probably did it in a minute and a half there, right? That you make 5 or 6 of those points, or as ones you feel comfortable with, they now see real value in the difference between why they should go it alone and why they shouldn't go it alone.
All right, boss. We want to take
All
some
right,
questions?
Questions. Ready for this? Thoughts that, other thoughts are helpful, but other questions or things that you wanted maybe us to elaborate on. This is just the buyer side of things. We'll get to the seller side in a second. So buyer side, providing value to a buyer's agent, something super important that maybe we missed or you want more clarification on. Up here, Zach. Beth Ann's got a thought up here.
And keep in mind when
and then get ready. I'm going to call on one or two of you in a second.
First of all, your home passes inspection when they stick the decal on the front window, right?
Oh.
Well, you said when does a home pass your pass inspection?
Oh, right.
You know, like your car,
yes.
you just put the counter,
exactly.
put it on the window, and you're
it's fast.
Yeah,
it's like, but it's falling down. No
one
pass.
area that I think is a lot of value is just the time savings, right? Just having one agent that can bang out a bunch of showings for you, or preview, or do video tours if you're out of the area.
It's a good thought process.
So I didn't know sort of your thoughts on.
I think that certainly could be applicable. I think it's a good thought to give to people. I think it's going to be more relevant if you're talking to somebody that you think is out of the area or is very time sensitive. I think that's a point you can make. I think the only thing we fight with a little bit when I talk about our value as a buyer's agent, what I think we're competing against is the buyer. The buyer thinks they can do this is the buyer that's on Zillow and Redfin and all every day. And they think they can just click the home to everyone that says, show me this home on my time schedule, right? They think that I don't think they totally see a lot of value. Some of them do, but some of them don't see the value in, well, I can go see 5 houses with Beth Ann today from 3 to 5 o'clock, because they think they can click on the buttons and somebody's going to show them that house on Redfin at 3 o'clock and 3:30 and 4 and 4:30 and 5, because I'm the buyer. I can click the button on Zillow or Redfin and somebody's going to compete for my business and show. Now I'm going to have 5 different people, but I don't really care, right? I'm trying to save the money. So I do think it's a good point. I think it's going to hit home with some. I didn't include it here because I want to make points that differentiate you and having somebody on your back. Whereas showing a home, I think is the concept that I was trying to get away from, because I think people think anybody will show them the home, now right or wrong.
Yeah, I think once you work with buyers that have tried I'll just wait for the open house, or I'll just click on the Redfin link, that's when they start to realize how much more efficient and better it is to work with one designated buyer's agent.
Absolutely. I think landing that efficiency argumented part of your thing is a good, we easily could have added it to this list as well.
Well, I mean, what you guys could keep in mind, when I started and I sent over the original list I mean,
We've had a lot of things.
there was like 15 pages of dialogue that I worked on that I originally sent over with just any and every question. I was going online. I was checking the forums, seeing what other people were getting objections from their clients on, and I was trying to have an answer for all of them, right? And then ultimately what I think Donnie and I tried to settle on was, if I have 2 minutes to explain to somebody why they need an agent, that's what we're discussing today. If I'm sitting in front of somebody doing my buyer consultation, that's what I'm going to talk about.
I'm going to land to that
all
value
day.
of efficiency. And
Right. I'm going to go.
Some of these other points I would make if I knew it was a conversation for a half hour, an hour, as opposed to I got to land this in 2 or 3 minutes.
If they're not convinced to use an agent, they're not going to be swayed by the fact that you can open a door for them or that you can make it more convenient, because in their mind, it's going to be the most convenient because I'm doing it. But I know, because I've already seen out there in these forums, people posting like, hey, I had a client reach out to me the other day and just said, hey, can you refer me to a real estate attorney so that I can get an idea what it would cost for them just to write an offer for me? I'll just skip the agent altogether. So that's what we're competing against, right? We're competing with, I need 2 minutes to convince you to have the conversation where I sit down and then I go through all of those key points where I'm going to provide all this tons and tons of value.
Yes, ma'am.
For me, one of the things is to, as Lynn often says, is a PPS person, to resolve a lot of the problems that they come up with. Because in my case, with the transaction, since it's such an unknown process and so complicated process, they call me with, hey, this guy by the name Richard called me and he says he's from the bank. Should I answer the phone call or not?
Right.
Oh, this other guy called me. He says he's from the title company. What is that?
Right.
Or what is this other thing? So I end up explaining a lot of the little steps and a lot of the anxiety that they're dealing with. Hopefully gets managed so much through my interventions and my explaining of the different processes. But I think yesterday, one of my clients said, thank you. They couldn't fill out a form. So I went out to meet them. I had to leave the meeting to do that. And when we're done, she said, you have no idea. I was so stuck with this one box that I thought we were going to lose the house.
Yeah. No, it's true.
Possible.
And I think that what you're bringing up are real anxieties and real stuff. And I think that falls into two of our points we made: understanding the contingencies and timelines and all the thing, and then the vetted network of professionals. I think you inadvertently hit both those things, right? Like when it's talking about the title and the lender and do I talk to this person? They need guidance through that process on how to set it up to begin with so they're protected, and then how to navigate it through with people that were trusted that are going to make sure they get to the finish line. So I think both those things are true. And I think that those experiences that we've all felt and you're saying you feel every day are the reasons that, I think that you want to hit those points on a global scale.
PPS is professional problem solver, for anyone who didn't know what that meant. So.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
PPS. There you go. Professional problem solver. Go ahead. What's up, Vips?
So I have just suggestion when we meet some first-time home buyer or any buyer in an open house, and they decide to see some home, and you're gonna represent your buyer agreement. 90% they don't want to sign because they don't know you in the first time.
Yep.
So I was just thinking, that's my thought. We should have something one-page buyer agreement to at least one or two. They know me, who I am, and they're going to work.
So I pushed MVAR actually in our they talked to us, a group of 10 or 15 of the biggest brokers around before they pushed out these forms. My whole point, and I had a lot of backing from the people in the room, was I wanted a one-page buyer agreement. They did not end up doing one, a one-page standard. And I think I understand why the hesitations were with it. The thing I would do is, I know the buyer agent is deeper, but if it were me, I would just shorten the time frames. Look, this is the only buyer agent agreement out there that exists, and this is the one that's acceptable. I don't think I want to create something that would be open to scrutiny outside of, did it really cover the bases that it had to cover? Is it really an official buyer agent agreement because it has to hit certain points? But I would do the one day, do one weekend. That's how I would handle if I were out there today. Give me a buyer agent agreement for one house. If you buy this house, I'll be your agent. Give me it for one day. Let me go show you places. Let's do it for a weekend. Let's date before we get married. I don't have to ask you to marry me and put a ring on it. And the first time I'm meeting you at an open house, but if you sign this buyer agent agreement, I can show you houses this weekend. I can represent you. If it goes good, we'll do a week. We'll do 2 weeks. Like, I don't need 120-day commitment the first time that we met each other. So that would be my answer to the story. I don't feel comfortable today creating a one-pager. Now, I am going to keep fighting for the fact that I think there should be a shorter abridged 1 or 2 page buyer agency agreement that comes out. But right now I don't see that.
I think VAR
And the one
has
Zillow came out with
Can't use
doesn't check all the boxes, just
No.
for the record.
I think VAR has one or was working on one, but I don't know if you want to mix forms and stuff. I will also say the worst thing about this is that everyone has to sign one. The best thing about this is that everyone has to sign one.
Yeah.
So at least when they're talking to other agents, you know that they're having to have the same conversation.
Well, and the point I would make to that is, well, the other person I met didn't make me sign one or didn't bring that up. Well, my point would be that means they're not playing by the rules. Do you want to get into a relationship with somebody that's already willing to cut corners when it comes to even starting the relationship with you? What corners are they going to miss, or what things are they going to miss later in the process? I pay attention to detail. I'm doing things the right way to make sure that you're represented in the correct way from beginning to end. So I think that the settlement, was good in this sense, is that it's become much more aware that now everybody has to do this, where it was the rule before, but I know a lot of people weren't. So I think the buyer agency agreement, if they say somebody else didn't try to get me to sign one, I think that's a great opportunity to say, well, those agents aren't somebody I ever want to work with because they're already not playing by the rules at the beginning.
This is something I think you guys should practice. You guys should find somebody and just say, hey, look, I'm not signing a buyer broker agreement. And then you need to be able to have that conversation. That was something I almost made it in today, but it's almost its own training because it's a little bit tricky and it's a little bit different.
So is there a hand behind you, Zach? And then I'm gonna call on somebody and pick on somebody.
Actually, this is about compensation. So
Okay.
I know you're going to talk about that, right?
Not necessarily, but go ahead.
Okay. So we did a buyer consult yesterday, and they saw the value, sent them over the buyer broker agreement. They actually wanted compensation back, handled that. Again, they saw the value, but they actually, because the way I was coming up, when I was working with buyers, I would say, hey, and I know we can't say this, our compensation is paid by the seller, right? So in all my years of transactions, I've never actually had a buyer actually pay us a commission.
Right.
Anyway, we had put language in the buyer broker agreement where you guys signed it, agreed to the terms that we put in there and other terms where it gives them an out if a property isn't offering a compensation that they can go unrepresented if they want. Well, these particular buyers, she's a lawyer, they want different language in reference to that. We have our minimum in there, of course, and we're just looking for some kind of feedback on that as far as like what kind of added language we can put in there, because they're motivated, they're a referral, they want to work with us, but they don't want to pay anything if it's not being offered on the seller.
So you can't take more than what you put in the contract now based on the new rules. So I would put either 2.5% or 3% of what your goal is to get paid, right? Now, if you wanted to put some kind of language in the other terms that said, if the seller wasn't going to pay all of this buyer agent commission, then we agree to rebate back a certain amount, or we agree to lower our amount to whatever. But start with the higher number. You can always put verbiage in later that says, if we're not able to get this as part of the contract, I'm willing to waive half of it or 1% of it or whatever that number is you're comfortable. But put the actual compensation here because that's your goal of getting it. You can always take less, or you can write language that says, if we're not able to get this as part of the contract offer, then we're willing to take 1% or 1.5%, or whatever that number you feel comfortable committing to. But the goal being that you're going to write it as your offer as that you're trying to get it paid for by the seller side. So that would be my advice. All right. Who thinks...
Looking for a victim. I mean,
I'm looking for a victim/volunteer. Who thinks that if I gave them 2 minutes, they could convince me why they need a buyer agent? Nobody. You want to go? All right.
Let's do it. He just did
All
it.
right.
He just did it.
Spotlight's
He's ready.
on you. You walk up to me and say, yeah, I'm going to see this house, but, we should make them come up.
Yeah, what's your name? You got to come up here. You got to come up here. Put you on.
Come on up.
What's
Come
your
on
name?
down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right.
Take my spot.
So we're doing a buyer consult?
Yeah, you got 2 minutes. I don't need a buyer. I'm just going to go through Redfin or Homes.com. I can find homes, and I'm just going to work with the listing agent. Why should I possibly have to pay you money?
Okay, I can appreciate that concern.
Use the mic, please.
I can appreciate,
Whoa, there.
I can appreciate that concern. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever bought a home before?
I bought a couple. Yeah, I'm pretty
Okay.
good at this.
Okay, last time did you actually use an agent?
I did. I used an
Okay.
agent, but
Okay.
last time the seller paid for it. I don't really like the idea of having to pay for my own agent.
Okay, are you familiar with the terms of the contract that they're actually...
I'm fairly familiar with them. Yeah, we bought probably last time was 5 years ago. I think my wife and I have bought 4 homes now.
Okay, so there's all kinds of contingencies in there. There's inspections and all that. Let me ask you a question. On this particular house, who do you think is representing the seller?
listing agent.
The listing agent.
Yeah.
So would that make sense to actually work with that agent? Are they looking out for your interest, or are they looking out for the seller's interest?
Probably the sellers. I
Right.
guess my hope is maybe I could get a little bit better deal, but
Of
they're
course.
probably looking out for the sellers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So if you look at it from their perspective, right, they're content. There's a lot of things that you're going to tell this agent, right? They're representing the seller. They're going to go back to them and tell them and use that as leverage. If you give them any information that's personal, whether it be, you're motivated. This is the school district. I mean, they're going to use that as leverage. They're going to nail you to the cross. And there's so many things that you could slip up in that contract. So
Nail me to the cross. That's gonna hurt.
So let me ask you this: if we could get this house for you,
yeah,
and our compensation is actually paid by
yeah.
the seller, would you be willing to work with me?
I think that would help. So I feel like, I do think that I'll just have to be careful what I say. It's a good point. It's a really good point you make there. But don't you feel like that I'm hearing now that they might have to charge me 2.5%, or that's going to be 2% or 3% of a deal? Like, I feel like maybe there's a little wiggle room. I could get a little bit better deal on the property.
And that makes a lot of sense to go that route. But it's not. I mean, that's not going to be the case. They're not going to give you anything. They're representing the seller. They're trying to get the seller the most amount of money.
Yeah.
And there's so many things in the contract that you need to go over. There's the home inspection. There's the HOA docs. There's other offers. You need a professional agent that represents you.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. It's a good point.
So,
That's a good point.
let's talk about it. Let's go over the contract, and we can tailor the contract to where, we can represent you, and we can work around the commission. We'll work with somebody that's going to offer you compensation, offer us the compensation, and get you the house.
That's good. That's good.
Fair enough.
All right.
Can we work together?
So I'm thinking about it.
Well,
Now,
what's there to think about? We got to get this house for you. There's 8 offers on
you
this
were
house.
very brave. That was harder than you thought, wasn't it?
Yeah, very hard.
He's nailed me to the cross, nailed him to the cross, right? And he hit some good points. You did a good job. You articulated some of the things that we talked about.
So would you hire me?
So I'm not there yet, but you're
okay.
there. It's some
right.
good things, right? So, but he talked about, some thoughts we talked about, right? The first one was not having the listing agent represent you because you want that seller. That's it. They're looking out for the seller's best interest. Like, he was driving into those, talked about some of the contingencies. Maybe, we talked about the school district. You brought in some of that, some of the contingency, maybe a little bit touching on a little bit deeper of the home inspection or appraisal. The things we didn't talk about maybe are getting to the finish line. And, what about if you have the vetted, network of resources, the first up stuff, negotiating and getting the best strategy. The other point that I might land is, look, there's 4 or 5 other properties. There's 4 or 5 other people interested. Are you going to win in a competition against 4 or 5 other people that do have a pro like me writing that offer? So you did a really good job, and it's a lot harder than you think, especially in front of 50 people and online. So everybody's people watching that. So good job. But,
great job.
Great job. You did.
Thank you.
Especially putting you on the spot right now. The other thought I always have is this. If you think it was hard here, and look, you walked up very confident. Your question before that was confident. But the point I was trying to make here is this. You need to practice this. You need to practice it with people that are going to be against you. I see a lot of head nod, and I love that, is your spouse, your friend. Grab each other. Go to a conference room. Sit. Practice with each other. I wasn't being overly difficult, right? But sometimes people are going to be overly difficult. But ask simple questions, because until you've had to answer it and say the things back and hit some key points. And the reason I give you the 5 points is this. I want you to have some pillars, 3 or 4. If you go into a blind, where's the conversation going to lead? You don't know, right? But if you got 3 or 4 or 5 pillars that you want to land in your conversation, you're going to be able to land there. I want to land. You need somebody negotiating for you. I want to land that I want to talk about contingencies. I want to land that I've got a network of people. The 3 or 4 or 5 things that you think you can confidently hit, make sure you hit those. Because now you're going to be confident. You're going to have reasons that they should buy into this, instead of, well, I can do this and that, and I don't know, right? It's harder than you think. That was the point I was making. So great job.
Awesome.
Thank you for
Thank
coming up. Awesome.
Thank
Great
you. That was awesome.
All right. So we've got that's our buyer section. So we've talked to buyers. All right. Now we could dive into it further, but we have all separate sections. Second. Easier for me to say. Second section we're going to go into. Why sellers should pay a buyer's agent. We're going to get this one all the time right now. We're going to get so many. You guys have probably already gotten it. You sat down to listing tables and they've said, So I hear I don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. That's great, right? I can save this money, right? So why are the reasons that we should emphasize that buyer agents are rock stars? Buyer agents are rock stars. They are. They help us get to the finish line. So I want us to have 4 or 5 pillars that we can point to be able to confidently get a 2-minute elevator speech in here. Now, next time I ask for volunteers, nobody's coming up here next, right? All right. Why sellers should pay a buyer's agent. First one, you want more buyer agents to show your home. There is no question that if you offer compensation out, you're going to have more showings. More showings. Easy thing for people to understand. They're going to get more showings if they offer out compensation to a buyer agent. Look, we can argue that some buyer agents, we shouldn't be discriminating out there. We shouldn't be just showing houses that offer compensation and don't offer compensation. But the idea is, now, we can argue about how many more showings. It might be 5%. It might be 60, 70% more. We don't know what the number is because we're never going to know it both ways, right? Mm-hmm. But we all have to be willing to concede you're going to get more showings if you offer out compensation than if you're not, right? There's a number in there. Maybe it's 2 more showings this weekend. Maybe it's 5 more showings this weekend. But if we offer out compensation to a buyer agent, and we make that clear to buyer agents to call, you're going to get more buyer agents. You're going to get more showings of your house with buyers that have agents attached to them.
It's not a conflict of interest anymore either, right? It's a term in our buyer broker agreement. If they don't want you to show them houses that isn't offering a commission because they want you, but they don't want to have to pay for you, then that's a direct result to the seller's showings. And we know online traffic dictates showings, showings dictate offers, offers dictate value or price, right? The more offers you have, the higher the price. So if you have less showings, that's the second step in the equation, which is going to prevent the amount of offers you get and how high that price goes. So when you think about it, you go, hey, you're really investing in potentially getting better terms to sell your home. It could end up costing you more than it would to pay a buyer's agent. At least something. Get them in the door. Show the house.
So more buyers, more showings, that's a given, right? Now, how many, we don't know. But we have to concede there's more showings. More showings leads to more good stuff. Second point, buyer agents promoting your home. Real life stuff, right? You're going to show the homes regardless because they saw them all on Redfin and you're a good buyer agent. You're going to show them all. I got 2 homes that are in the same neighborhood. One of them is offering me 2.5%. One of them is offering me no commission or 1% commission. Now, I'm not saying that I want whatever's the best for my buyer, but we have to point them in this. Do you want the buyer agent to promote your home and try to get them to write an offer on your home? Or do you want them to promote the other home, right? There is a rule of nature here that's going to take over that's going to say, look at this beautiful home. Well, we can adjust the kitchen. You don't love the kitchen. We can always get new appliances or new countertops. We can fix this up. But look at this beautiful lot out here. You can't buy this lot in this neighborhood. This is the place to be. You can always fix up the little inside. Or the one down the street that is better looking. It was like, yeah, but this lot, you're never going to, you don't want this kitchen. I mean, it's going to cost so much to upgrade this kitchen. There's different ways that a buyer agent can spin 2 similar properties because human nature takes over. Here I'm getting paid $15,000 if they buy it. Here I've got to fight for it, and maybe I'm going to make $5,000 or $10,000. Which one is that buyer agent going to naturally talk up more in the conversation? Well, if it's me, I want that buyer agent to promote my property because to Richard's point, if I can get not just 1 offer, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 offers on this property, my price just went way up. But if I've got 1 offer, I'm getting $500. If I've got 4, I'm getting $550 because that's how this world works, right? So the idea that you want buyer agents to be on your side and promoting your house over the one next to it is not, it's not unethical like talked about, that's just human nature. They're going to talk up once as they're getting paid more on. And I like to also spin it where, if you go to work every day, whatever you do, Mr. Seller, right? If you're going to get $10,000 for your job this week, or you're going to get $5,000 this week for your job, are you going to work harder or not hard? You're going to work harder if you're going to get 10,000. There's a rule of nature here that says that if I do this, I get this paid this. If I do this, I'm going to pay this. That we're going to want to work to the one that we're going to get more paid higher on. There's just however you want to frame that point, but people can translate it to when you put it into their world sometime. I think the first point people are going to understand. Yeah. But if you need to translate it further, you can translate it to their own job and how they would work harder if they got compensated double that week if they did extra stuff. They're going to want to do whatever it takes to get extra stuff.
Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're going to pay salespeople to sell your house. Do we want them to sell your house or someone else's? Period.
That's a good one. That's put better than all my words. But the idea is still the same. You want to paint that picture, like you said, story sell, right? The story sells of, do you want them to sell the one down the street or do you want them to sell yours? That's what salespeople are paid to do. We want to pay them the fair rate so that they're much more likely to bring them and want to sell our house. Have a professional guiding the buyer through the contingencies and process. Now it's flipped on. Remember, we have the sellers now. The story I would tell is this. Anybody in this room that has sold a home that had a buyer come in unrepresented can attest to what I'm saying right now. The percentage of people that get to closing when they're unrepresented is dramatically less than the people that get to closing that have a buyer representation. Why? Buyers that come in unrepresented don't think rules apply to them. You don't want a buyer that comes in here without an agent. Yes, they're cheaper, maybe, but they don't think home inspection rules apply to them. They don't think appraisal rules will apply to them. They don't think that lender timelines. I've had people, real life buyers out there doing unrepresented stuff that switched lenders a week before closing because somebody offered them a better rate, or they pulled something up online that they could get 0.5% better with, some new rocket mortgage line, and they switched the lender a week before closing because nobody's explained to them you're not going to be able to get to closing now. Nobody's explained to them that they have to actually get with the lender early to order an appraisal and go through the process. So then they go to closing and there's no appraisal done. There's no termite inspection done that was supposed to be done on their end. The home inspection, they missed all their deadlines, so now they can't legally do a home inspection, so they're super mad at you and they don't want to buy the home anymore. Buyers that don't have a guide through the process miss steps all the time. And even though I'm going to try to impress upon them, here's what you need to do, here's the deadlines, they don't want to listen to me. I'm not their realtor. I can't advise them. I can tell them what's going on, what the deadlines are, but they're not going to listen to me through the process. They're already coming into this on their own because they don't believe that buyer agents have any value. So they're not going to listen to what we say. They're going to miss deadlines. They're not going to do the things that they need to get to closing. It doesn't matter how much we save at contract time if we never actually have a closing. I have stories upon story of sellers that have gone this route before. Then they get all their stuff on a moving truck. Closing's Friday. They're moving out of town. They're moving down the street. They're closing at 10 o'clock on their sale and noon on their purchase. And they're moving this weekend and everybody's happy. And then what happens Thursday? We get a call that the loan's not done. The appraisal's not done. Buyer's not even close to being ready. Buyer's having cold feet. Buyer changed their mind a week ago and didn't tell anybody. Now what's happened?
Buyer showed up to walk through with a Cadillac.
Yeah. Buyer showed walk through with a Cadillac. Their lending's all out of whack. Their credit score's out of whack. Their debt to income ratios are out of whack. We have had tons and tons of stories of sellers that are on moving trucks, ready to go, and the buyer never performed because they didn't have somebody babysitting them through every step of the process. They didn't have somebody, a professional on the other side, that got them through the contingencies, that got them through the process, made sure they were hitting all the deadlines to make sure that we're all getting paid on July 15th. You're selling your property on July 15th and you can move on. It doesn't matter if you think you've got a great deal on June 1st, if on July 15th, you don't have a sale that closes. You want to make sure that they've got a professional guiding them through that process.
You know what's great about this? You don't pay anything to a buyer's agent unless they actually close on your house. So you could go 99% of the way there and pay nothing if it doesn't settle. So facilitating and getting it to closing, you have somebody on the other side of the coin that's incentivized to get your house to the settlement table. Why wouldn't you want two people working towards that end?
Yep. So I think that it's important that they understand that other side of it, that the buyer agent has a real value to promote the property, bring the offer, and then help get it to closing because they're only getting paid if they help get that buyer to the finish line. So that's the other huge point I want to make. Much higher probability your property closes. I hit this on the last point, but I think it's important that you tie that in. They're guiding you through the process and a much higher probability that you actually get to closing. It doesn't matter what you contract now if it never closes. You have a much higher chance of getting to the finish line if you have a professional buyer agent that walked them through every step of the way and got to the finish line. Risk management against future lawsuits. So this is what I really think is going to happen personally. Okay, now I could be wrong, and I honestly hope I'm wrong. Okay, the fallout from all of this, now this is off the record, not something I would necessarily display to my sellers, but this is my thought of the whole industry right now. I think we're going to wake up in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months from now, and we're going to have some serious lawsuits on their hands from buyers. Some buyers that couldn't afford a realtor, that were backed into corners and used the seller's realtor, and then they got taken advantage of. Now, maybe they were taken advantage of intentionally or maybe unintentionally. They didn't understand the value of a home inspection. They didn't understand the value of an appraisal. They went through the whole process and they got screwed and all of a sudden had to clean out their piggy banks and ask mom and dad for the extra $20,000 to get to closing because the appraisal came in low. Or they bought a house without a home inspection and then moved in and realized there's $10,000 of work that they can't pay for. Now they've moved into this house that is all broken and they had no idea because nobody helped guide them through this way. The lawsuits that are going to come on the other side of this because people weren't represented are going to be tremendous. And I think that we're going to have organizations for first-time home buyers and minority buyers and all these people that the NAHREPs are going to be very strong through this. And I think that we're going to have some real issues with buyers that were taken advantage of because they didn't understand the process. They couldn't afford a realtor and sellers weren't willing to pay them. Now, when these buyer lawsuits come out, who are they going to come at? The listing agent and the seller that they think we're taking advantage of them, right? So what I would do is say risk management against future lawsuits. Look, I'm going to work as a listing agent to get you your best deal possible. But let's say that we get somebody that comes in represented and they waive their home inspection or they waive their appraisal or they waive all these contingencies because that's what in our best interest. But then 6 months from now, something breaks in the house. Who knows? We had no idea it was going to break. Basement floods. A storm comes in here, causes an issue, right? They get upset because they can't afford the house anymore for some reason. Who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the fact that they weren't represented. They're going to blame you, Mr. Seller, and me because they think we tricked them into buying this house or we took advantage of them because they didn't have an agent. I don't want to be on the other side of a lawsuit later, and I'm sure you don't want to be on the other side of a lawsuit later because we didn't have representation on the other side. So I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I wouldn't want to take that chance in the future that a buyer is going to get squirrely or upset because they have buyer's remorse 6 months from now because they didn't have somebody protecting them through the process.
Yeah, I just think, what's really interesting is when you look at the lawsuit that's currently, that we're changing all this for, it expires in 7 years. Why? Why does it expire in 7 years? Why isn't it forever? Because they don't think it's going to last that long. There's going to be another lawsuit. There already are buyer lawsuits, but I think exactly what Donny just said is what's going to happen. If you take aside property management out of the real estate equation for litigation, dual agency is the highest litigated thing in real estate, right? When dual agency takes place, that's where the most lawsuits happen. You can't tell me that unrepresented buyers aren't going to also probably fall into that equation as well. In the 1990s, buyer agency became a thing because buyers sued saying they thought the listing agent represented them. Right. So that's all we're doing. It's just history is repeating itself over again.
Buyer agency was created because buyers felt like they were being taken advantage of by sellers and listing agents. And that is going to circle back around. And I wouldn't personally want to be the seller that is on the other end of one of these upset buyers in 6 months or a year after my closing. And I think I've moved on. Yeah. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but at least opening the door that that's a possibility for a seller as it's me, I'd want to be like, I don't want to be a part of that. Make sure they have somebody representing them because I don't want somebody to put the crosshairs back on me in 6 months or a year. So risk management against future lawsuits is a point that I might touch on when I'm talking about commissions. So that was our 5. Our bonus one. When you buy, 2 bonus ones, I guess, right? So 2 thoughts that I would want to keep in the back of my head. When you buy, you're going to buy from here. Now, this only works if they're going to go buy, right? Do you want an agent on your hand? Do you want the seller to pay for it or do you want to pay for it? A lot of people want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Well, if you're going to go buy something else, do you want somebody to represent you? Well, yeah, of course I want an agent. Well, do you want to pay the agent or do you want the seller to pay for it? Well, I want the seller to pay for it. Oh, I see your point, right? So I just think bringing up that scenario to people helps, right? For them to see the big picture. Then the bottom one there is, in our listing agreements, and you've probably gotten to this point before you talk to the buyer agent, right? You're going to pay me, I'm just going to say a number here, okay? You're going to pay me 2.5% to sell your home, argument's sake, right? And then in the new contract, it says what we're going to pay an unrepresented buyer if they come in. And they've probably already agreed to, hopefully you put something in there. For me, I'm going to put at least 1% in there. Because I'm going to put the idea that, look, if somebody comes in here without an agent, I'm going to have to babysit them, and my job to get them to closing. There needs to be more work. There needs to be extra compensation. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. 1% extra, no big deal. Then they get to the buyer agent side, and they say, well, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. Well, hold on. You already said you were willing to pay 1% to me if there was no buyer agent, right, to guide them through the process. So at a minimum, it should start at the idea that we're going to pay the buyer agent at least 1% because you want somebody to guide them to the finish line. Now, maybe you're only willing to do 1.5% or 2%, but something. We can talk about that value, but it should start at the idea that you think that the other side is worth something to, hold their hand and get it to finish line. So those are the extra two the bonus thoughts we had in mind. Thoughts on either bonus thought?
Oh, I love it. That one actually came up at the mastermind, and I hadn't considered it. And that one really stood out to me, and I used it recently with a seller, just saying the cost is exactly the same. If it's unrepresented, it's actually going to cost you more, so I think that's a really good point, just to say, hey, let's make it uniform across the board. They get representation and all the other benefits, and it could end up costing you more to have all the risk that we just laid out a couple slides ago. So
2 extra bonus thoughts. It's actually 7 thoughts, 5 rules, and then 2 extra bonuses. Sorry. Now we get to open up for thoughts. So those are all kind of our general points, and obviously we can dig deeper on all those, but our general points on you're talking to a seller. I tightened up. Sorry, Justin. I got louder. I tightened up my ear a little bit. General thoughts on your 5, actually 7 points on why I would portray to a seller that they need a listing, that they need to pay that buyer's agent. So thoughts and questions on that, and then we'll have some discussion on that. Then I'm going to call up a guinea pig. Miss Elizabeth.
Hi.
Oh, that was Macho Man's girlfriend back in the day. Miss Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, that's right. I think something else I would point out, back to your point about competition breeding the best price, is that, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, please understand buyers have to bring a lot of money to the table to begin with. They have to bring their down payment. They have to bring their closing costs. They have to bring their prepaids. This is a third bucket of money that we would be dumping on them, essentially. And if we get one extra buyer on your house, even one, and that gives me 2 offers to play off of each other, I could make you another $30,000, $50,000, $70,000, bam, in a second. I would never, ever, ever shave off a 2.5% off of your price point to try to save money. You're going to end up spending money.
Well, I think it's a great point, Elizabeth. And I think Richard said it, but we didn't probably land it enough. More showings was our first one, and buyer agent promoting your house over others was my second point. Those two together, you can't underscore you can't underemphasize the ability that if there's more offers, there's a much better price point. Not only for pricing, that I'm going to get you that 2.5% more, but the terms and conditions that we're going to be able to negotiate. There's a whole different world, Mr. Seller, if we have 1 offer on your house or 4. Or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6. Every extra offer provides extra leverage. We're going to be able to get more money for you, better terms, and a better situation for you. So we want as many offers as possible and as many showings as possible. Helps us get there.
Yeah, I just think sellers forget, because they haven't bought in a while, potentially, that the buyers have their own closing costs already.
They do, and I think it's a great point. I think there's some part of them that doesn't care, honestly. I'm just being frank. I think that it's good to point that out. There's a part of them that doesn't care. It's their problem.
I understand you may not care, Mr. Seller, but think about it this way. Your closing costs come out when you're receiving a big paycheck at the end of the day. The buyer's closing costs come out with all they're doing is putting money out. They're not getting anything back at the end of the day. You're getting your proceeds. They are not.
Right.
So I understand you may not care, but you should care, because if we can provide 1 extra buyer for your house, that may be the only buyer you get. Or if I get 2, I could make you another $20,000, $30,000, $50,000.
And I think that's the part that makes them care. It's not, exactly. It's not only, there's a sympathy card there that they have to understand that everything's coming out of the buyer's bank account to make all these things happen. But the idea is, if you can make it easier on them, the part you want to emphasize is more offers, even one that we didn't have by offering this, but more offers creates more money for you. And that's what we need. We need more offers on your property, because that creates competition, creates higher pricing and more in your pocket at the end of the day. Lynn, did you have a hand behind Elizabeth?
Thank you. Just a quick comment. Yes, we are doing the seller consultation page by page, understanding the value throughout our footprint. So keep your toes and eyes open for those. Buyer consult, yeah. A great way to come back, whether it be on the buyer side or the seller side, is to just you kind of lower your voice, cock your head just slightly, and say, so, Mr. Seller, explain to me why it makes sense to you not to offer compensation over, because you understand it is going to shrink your buying pool, which is also going to lower competition, blah, blah. Explain to me why that makes sense to you.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah. That's a great way to put it, because, again, it's going to stump them a lot of times.
For an answer. Yeah. I'll give you.
It was rhetorical.
I'll give you the seller answer, but it was rhetorical. But yes. Well, right. The idea, obviously, is that, yes, it's another good point that you want to make to point on them is that, I think putting it back on them is a strategy that can make sense. But and like you said, taking the temperature down doesn't make it confrontational. And I agree with the point. I think the point what I would to emphasize the positive and not, if you feel like you have to flip it on its head and make them ask the question, then that's a good strategy as well. But to me, we need a mic up here for Beth Ann. It's to bring up all the positives of offering it and how it's going to create more interest, more offers, higher pricing, better terms for you.
More so on the selling side, but what are sort of the things you've been discussing when it comes to reminding both buyers and sellers that this is actually all negotiable on the sales contract?
So I don't think that, and again, once we get to August 14th, technically it's whatever's in the contract now, right? But the idea that I want to get forth in the listing presentation is, when I talk to sellers, is I want them to understand what the value is, so that when buyer agents call me, then I'm like, yes, we're willing to offer compensation, put in your thing, because we're going to get more people to show and more offers to come in. But I want to make sure that they have said, look, it's all negotiable. Whatever's in the contract is going to be in the contract. We're going to get offers over. It's going to have compensation. It's going to have different levels of compensation. We can judge them all the same. But what I want to get across to you right now in my listing presentation is why buyer agents are rock stars, the huge value they provide in making sure that we get the best offer, we negotiate all the way best through, and we get to an actual closing and all those things, and we lower our risk management. So I wanted you to understand why buyer agents are rock stars and why they're important. Because when we get these contracts over, they're going to have buyer agent compensation in there. So I want us to be prepared for the fact that we should be paying this out, and this is why we're paying it out, because it's going to help net you the highest net at the end of the day. So I think that they all have to understand it's all part of the contract now. But I think on both sides, what we're talking about is preparing our buyer for why they need me and they should put this in the offer, and preparing the seller for why it's going to come over and why they should honor it, because it's super valuable to have that buyer agent paid for by you, so that we can make sure that they stay in the deal. So, I think just emphasizing that the contract rules, everything is important, but I just want the ideas to get across on both sides so that they see the value and they don't question it when it comes over, that it's just a part of the bigger picture.
Yeah. I like that framing, or that it's a different part of the conversation. But I think if you have a hesitant seller, just sort of reminding them that if there are multiple offers,
we could always counter this later.
It's a term.
Yeah.
It's a
It's
term.
a term in the contract. We could always counter later.
And the reality is, they can offer 3, and they could end up paying 0.
Right. We could have a buyer agent.
You don't
that
want
comes
to
in
promise that, but
Right.
that is the reality of it. Because if you have 30 offers, then honestly, commission might become one of the factors in it. A buyer agent might be willing, or a buyer might be willing to pay it in order to be able to make their offer that much stronger. People want to pay 100, 200 grand cash over list price, probably willing to pay maybe a buyer's agent as well. So if you need to do that in order for them to buy into the conversation a little bit more, because they're just being obstinate and they heard something in the news and some talking head told them to do it this way, and that's who they're going to listen to. I mean, it's a fair conversation point that it is all negotiable. You need to also prep your buyers for that too. You need to explain, just because they said they will, or I checked and it said that, and we write an offer, it could be countered. So you don't want to be promising anything, no guarantees.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one thought on the risk management, and I thought that was brilliant, talking to the seller about the risk management. That was a good thought.
Thank you.
How do you feel about incorporating that into your buyer consult? I mean, you don't want to say, hey, there could be lawsuits, but I think that's a good point, because if I'm a listing agent, you just said that, and I was thinking about it. Most of the time, a good, really strong listing agent might not even want to deal with that buyer, because they're going to be doing extra work and all this other stuff. I know there's the other compensation.
Oh, so you're saying as a buyer consult to say there are a lot of listing agents.
Like they might go to the listing agent and like you got to get an agent.
Oh,
Right.
100%. That
it could flip on its head. Some listing agents won't want to take unrepresented buyers because they don't want to expose themselves to that. Right.
Or that the listing agent's incentivized for you to come unrepresented. They make more money by you being unrepresented. So it doesn't necessarily save the seller money. That's another really good point to make to your buyers during the buyer consult.
Right. Is that they might be making extra money. Right. But I think the risk management part's, a real thing that could happen. I think I see your point. I don't think Joe Byers going to go the whole, maybe not frame it, but I definitely jive with you. It might not be that they're willing to go 2 steps further and see listing agent might not take your offer because they're worried about you suing them later. But I could see that being a real thing. Yeah, sure. Other thoughts, questions?
I saw something interesting the other day, Donnie,
Uh-oh.
in one of the forums. Somebody's script was, "Oh, okay, so you're not going to pay a buyer's agent. Awesome. We'll just lower the price by that amount." Right?
Right.
'Cause you don't have that cost, right? So we'll
Right.
make the price more favorable.
But that's
so
not going to help.
I'm just saying. I'm just
No,
saying.
it's an interesting thought. All right, who wants to be my guinea pig? Who thinks they can do this well? Explain why buyer agents are rock stars. Elizabeth, there you go. She
Here we
got
go.
talked into it. All right. She didn't know when I come on up here. Come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right. When I walked in this morning, I said, Elizabeth's here. I'm going to pick on her. And then she didn't know what I was going to pick on her for. All right. So I'm the seller. Yes, because they.
Testing.
Is it on? Yeah. Okay. So I'm the seller, and I don't want to pay a buyer's agent.
Okay.
You think you can make some good points on that?
I hope so.
All right. So I heard you don't. I was watching the news. I hear you don't have to pay a buyer's agent anymore. So that's great. I'm willing to pay you. What do you want? 3%? Great. You're a great
10.
agent.
Let's do 10.
10.
Let's do 10.
All right. Let's talk about that 10. All right. No, 3%. I'm in for paying you 3%, but I don't think I need to pay a buyer's agent.
Yeah, and you're certainly right. You absolutely don't have to. And
Okay.
there's a market out there for that. Have you ever heard of FSBO, for sale by owners? that
Yes,
market's
but
been
I'm
out
paying
there.
you.
I understand.
Okay.
I understand. No, thank you so much. But a lot of times what we see is, for example, if I have a buyer that I'm representing and they see some houses out there and one of them might be a for sale by owner, that particular seller usually is not offering buyer agency. So the market exists.
Okay.
And you can go that route. But what we have found study after study, and I'm no economist and I'm not putting out the research, I'm just the messenger, but those houses tend to sit a lot longer. The pricing on them goes a lot lower. The transactions fall apart a lot more. And again, please do your own research on that. But we feel that the reason for that is because when you have a professional representing the other side, okay, first and foremost, you're going to get more offers on your house.
I like more offers.
Right?
I like more
But here's the thing. More offers literally equals more money, which is what you care about, right?
I like more money.
Okay.
That's actually what I like more.
My whole goal is to get you the most money that I possibly can.
Okay.
The reason I can do that and the best way I can do that and the way you can support me in doing that is to allow me to bring the most amount of buyers. Because even if I get just 2 offers on your house versus 1, because you're offering compensation,
Right.
and we now get 2, I am going to roll up my sleeves, call each agent back and work them against each other and bump your price right up.
Yeah.
I cannot do that with 1 offer.
And do you don't think that people they're just going to see it on Zillow and come call you and see it, or see it at the open house and compete?
My job is not to get your house shown.
Okay.
You're correct. You
Right.
don't need me for that.
Right.
If you needed me or a buyer needed me to tell them what they liked and what they should buy and what they should look at, that's not my job. My job is to assist you in not only getting the right offer, but getting the best compensation with the least amount of contingencies. We didn't even talk about contingencies yet. Okay. And if a buyer's coming to the table without representation, I promise you, they're going to fill every single contingency out and it's going to be a complete nightmare. If they're professionally represented, that buyer's agent, we would hope, would be professional in as much as educating their buyers and saying, look, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, this is truly a seller's market. It's not a buyer's market. We need to forego this. We need to forego that. Let's put a cap on the contingency appraisal. Let's potentially waive financing if we're clear with your lender. So we're now starting with our success rate up here versus with an unrepresented buyer way down here. And I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do it. But what I'm saying is if it were me and I was selling my house today, even knowing what I know, I would still want my own agent and I would want my buyers represented. And I do this every single day. Every single day.
She did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
She's like, I blacked out for a second. It's harder than you think, though, right? You think
I'm
you could do that
literally
great.
shaking right now.
Yeah. Well, this is a little bit different. A lot of people here and online and all that, not at a kitchen table where I'm sure that you're very comfortable. Now, Elizabeth sells 50, 60, 70 homes a year or whatever, right? Elizabeth does this a lot, and Elizabeth's pretty good at this, right? So you are very comfortable with that conversation. And I think you've done a good job there. And I could have maybe pushed harder, and I think that you were getting to the success rate part. I think those were some of our pillars as well. And she didn't have to hit on risk management part, but I think she tried to make a compelling enough argument that more showings equals more offers, equals more money for you, equals a higher success rate. And I think those are the dots you need to connect. And that's what we try to do with our 5 or 7 key points. And, I think some of even the add-ons about, you're also going to buy next, right? Okay. Well, do you want an agent there? Do you want to pay for that agent, or do you want the seller to? I think framing those things, if I had kept pushing, I think Elizabeth probably would have even gotten to more of those points because she's internalized as well. So Elizabeth did such a good job that she made it look easy, right? But do you think that that's easy? No. But, so I still want to reemphasize the point that practicing is important. Get with each other, practice these conversations, because back there, Elizabeth could have verbalized these things in her head super easy. But getting up here or even getting in front of 2 people and doing it is harder to put the words in front of you and articulate that 2 or 3 minute elevator speech that you need to do. So that's kind of the point I want to make, is give you some pillars to go off of, practice that elevator speech. So when your time is here, you are ready to articulate your value as a buyer's agent, or you're ready to tell that seller why they need to pay a buyer's agent.
I would also just say that it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
You could literally mess up the entire what you wanted to say, but if you come at them with confidence and
Yes.
they trust you, and you're telling them, look, you're in your best interest to offer 2.5%, even if you can't articulate it, they're going to do it. So
Yep.
don't worry too much about the exact scripting,
Nope.
although it's better to have it.
No, and
better
that's
than
why.
not, but they want to be led, and they
Yes.
want to follow you if they trust you.
100%. And that's why,
Yeah.
and Richard's got scripts and you can do scripts, but the major reason I love the actual scripts words is this. I want you to have some pillars and some points ready, but it's all about confidence. And that's why I want you to practice it. Is the other word that is super important is confidence and delivery. And Elizabeth nailed that point, which is, the reason that I wanted people to come up here is because I wanted you to see how hard it is, but also that confidence. If you're confident in the points you're making, they're going to go wherever you want them to go. But if you're uneasy about what you're going to say or why they should use it, or you don't really believe that a buyer agent has value, then they're never going to believe it, right? And you're not going to be able to confidently give what she just did to a seller unless you've practiced saying it a few times.
Yeah, confidence
That first
comes with
time,
practice.
Confidence
Yeah.
comes with practice. You can know all these things in your head, but if you never verbalize them until you're at a seller's door next Wednesday, you're going to fall on your face. You just will. You have to practice these conversations. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, you're
Great job.
All right. So Richard does have handouts because I did promise we were going to give you the handouts. The idea that we had, and we just hit it home here, we want to do today is commission conversations. There's 2 really important conversations we're going to have, right? We're going to talk to buyers and we're going to talk to sellers. And Richard and I wanted to give you these pillars, these ideas, these thoughts that are a little more organized than 795,000 things we do for a buyer's agent as a buyer's agent. But I wanted you to have these pillars that you could work through, talk through, give your 2 or 3 minute elevator speech, practice it. And the next time you sit at a listing table and a seller tells you that, or the next time a buyer says, why don't I need a buyer's agent? I want you to be ready to have those conversations, because those conversations are going to happen all over the place, especially on August 17th when that comes down in bright. But they're already happening now. Every day when you sit with a seller, they're looking at you saying, why do I have to pay a buyer's agent? Or I don't have to anymore, right?
They are
Closing
indeed.
thoughts. Closing thoughts.
We got these handouts, guys. Grab them. We're going to put them on the Nest so you guys can, if you want digital copies just to have handy, 100% please practice these. There's, 30, 40 people in the room right now that are probably all thinking I should practice this, and ask any one of them. And I'm sure you guys could sit down and go through and role play that. Takes 10,000 hours for mastery. So you need to begin that mastery now. Now, some of you guys got a head start. Some of you have been doing that, but that's important. You guys can grab these handouts. I'll put them back here before you leave. You have another thought?
Yeah, if you're watching this online, guys, look, practice. Get in your local offices where you're at. Managers or team leads or people out there, practice, practice, practice. You don't have to say exactly what Richard and I said, but we've given you 5 to 7 good pillars to go off of. Find your story. Be confident in your story. Be confident in your thoughts. Practice with objections, right? Not everything's always smooth sailing. So I think that this is a great start to giving you the tools to go out there and really crush it. So thank you, everybody, for coming today. Thank you all for watching online. Hopefully everybody's a little more prepared. Thank you all.